Life is messy and unpredictable.
Being able to find joy in the weeds of life is so important. I'm Beth.
And I'm Kim, and we are so glad you've joined us as we figure out how to hold joy in one hand and struggle in the other.
Welcome to Joy in the Weeds. All right. We're here.
We did. It worked.
Yay.
Just so you all know, we were just trying the process of us actually putting the video on instead of having to have it edited in later. And you know me, I'm not about the whole technology thing. But we got it to work.
We did.
Although I found a flaw in that little intro that I'm so thankful that they did for us. When it says, I am Beth and I am Kim, it shows a picture of both of us. So in case anyone is wondering, I am Beth.
And I'm Kim.
Because think about it. They don't know who we are.
That's true.
I would want to know. Anyway, and we have a wonderful guest with us, Natalie. I am so excited that she is here.
Me too.
I have to tell you, the very first time I met Natalie, I was at a young adults event with all my gray hair. Should not have been, but I just wanted to go. And it ended up being just such a blessing on so many levels. But anyway, I met Natalie, and I don't remember who came up to whom first, but we started chit-chatting. And it was one of those things similar to Kim and I, where instant connection.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, we were sitting there chatting for a while, and I think my then boyfriend at the time had to come over and be like, okay, we're done talking now.
That's funny.
Oh, that's so great. And Kim, good to see you.
Thank you. Good to see you too. I just saw you last night, but I saw Natalie this morning, but I didn't see her like live.
Oh,
because I watched you on Facebook this morning.
Oh,
yes.
Well, it's good to see you face to face.
For sure.
All right. Well, we are here to just talk with Natalie. Natalie, we had that wonderful conversation, and we've talked several times since. In fact, you're going to be coming to our retreat and helping me out women's ministries in different ways, and I'm just so excited about getting to work with you.
Oh.
However, until I saw your video that Kim is referring to on Facebook, I realized I didn't know you. Isn't that interesting how we can have conversation and really connect, and yet, it takes time to really get to know one another. Anyway, so as soon as I saw that, I thought we've got to have her on the podcast. And here's the reason why. All right. Well, I'll just make it real about today.
Yeah.
I went and started to get ready for this. And now that we're on video, it's a little more involved than setting up the microphone like it used to be. And so I'm trying to get ready. And then about just 10 minutes ago, before I, logged in and started getting ready, I came up with this huge, awful headache. And as soon as I saw my face come up on the screen, I was like, oh, Beth, you can tell. And I instantaneously had this, I start criticizing all kinds of things. And then I thought, we just do that too much. We are not kind to ourselves. And we've talked about that before on here. And knowing that you were coming on, Natalie, I was telling myself, just stop it. Just stop it. This is not, we're just three girls getting ready to have a chit chat. And, anyway, much more important. Kim, rescue me. I'm floundering.
Well, how about we ask Natalie to tell our listeners who she is, because we know who she is. But our listeners don't know who she is and what she's about and a little bit about herself. So Natalie, we're going to pass it over to you so you can give us a little introduction.
Sure. Who am I? We could go a lot of different directions with that.
Go wherever you want to go, babe.
Sure. Well, First of all, I'm so glad to be here. And Beth, I'm so glad we stayed in touch, and you two are just so much fun. So thank you for having me. And you look great, Beth, for the record. And I'm sure everyone watching will agree. But who am I? So I graduated from Southern Adventist University almost a year ago. And since then, I've been interning as a communication intern in the Pennsylvania conference while my husband finishes up seminary. And then we'll head back to the Carolinas where he'll be pastoring. But that's him. Me, I'm very passionate about girls and women's ministries, and especially young women, being that I'm in my early 20s, speaking into the lives of teenagers, knowing what that feels like, and instilling confidence in them that they can be whoever they want to be, and most importantly, whoever Jesus has called them to be, no matter what's going on in their life. And so I think that's what makes me me. And I love people. I love talking to people and meeting new people. I have a cat. I like to read.
Oh, what
I
are you
love
reading
that.
right now? What are you reading right now?
I have been reading Relationship Goals by Michael Todd. He's a young man, young Christian author, kind of just a mainstream Christian guy, and he talks about different types of relationships. So single, married, friendships. And so I've been reading that with a group of 5 or 6 other young girls that I graduated from school with. So we've been meeting on Zoom weekly and reading that together.
What have you learned?
Ooh, I think the main thing that I liked from it so far is, because we've only been at it for a couple weeks, is there's a section, I think it's in chapter 2, where he talks about how we shouldn't let experiences in previous relationships, or like broken relationships or harmful friendships, make us feel scared about the potential that can happen with relationships in the future, and that those can turn around. And so I thought that was really cool.
Does he give you tips on how to avoid that? Because that's a very challenging thing to do.
He does. Yeah. I mean, no, he talks, there's lots of little, like it has discussion questions, and we all talk about, like, well, this is what I got from it, and he talks about, this is how you look for safe, healthy people, etc. So I've been liking
That's
it.
awesome. So I've loved following you since we met on Facebook, and I have been so interested in your wedding marriage journey.
Oh,
Because you got married during all of this craziness that has happened. So
yeah.
can you just like tell us like the very quick version of that?
Sure. My 2 weddings. Yeah.
To the same man, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. That's important to clarify.
Yes.
So my husband's name is Devin Lilly, and so now I'm Natalie Lilly, which I think is so fun. I think Lilly is a great last name.
It's such a good name. I
really
absolutely
is.
love it too.
Yeah, I feel like I lucked out with that one, but also with the guy. But the name was a good bonus. So we met and started dating when we were both students at Southern, and then I was looking for, so Andrews, well, Devon's in seminary at Andrews, and so they, since COVID has happened, have decided that they're allowing their graduate students to do like self-paced, fully online, if they so choose, or with Zoom. So he kind of started when that was allowed. So I said, okay, well, I have a year. Let me start looking for jobs and see if there's something I can do for a year before we settle down and start pastoring. So I got a call to the Pennsylvania conference, and they were gracious and understood that I would only be with them for a year, but they wanted to bring me on. And so our wedding was originally planned for August of 2021. But we said, okay, well, we're going to take on this job and we're going to go there for a year. Why would we move twice or move there and get two separate places and all of that? And so we decided my family was coming in for graduation weekend in May, and his family lives locally. And so we were like, and I had seen all of the COVID elopements, and I was like, well, we're still in COVID. I feel like an elopement would be would be appropriate. Why can't we do that? And so I went back and forth and I talked to my girlfriends and I was like, well, is it going to like quote unquote ruin the big wedding day if we do it early and all of that? So long story short, we decided it would not. And it was so special. We had 20 people there at most. We each had, two of our closest friends and then our siblings and my parents were there. And so we did our wedding was Sabbath, May 8th. We all gathered at an Airbnb and it was a beautiful like outlook of like the mountains of Georgia. It was like an hour away from Southern, and we had a friend who's a photographer take pictures, and it was just so special and intimate, and we felt like we could really say what was on our heart and cry as much as we wanted to because it was only our closest people. So we did our wedding, and then we did graduation the next day. I graduated, and then we put all of our stuff in a moving truck and we headed here to Pennsylvania. And then we did I know, it's a lot.
It is a lot.
Yes. But it was so fantastic. And then we had those next 3 months to just continue planning the wedding, the big wedding that we had already planned. And it was a fun celebration. And we said our vows again, and our family totally understood that, this was the best decision for us. And so no regrets. I would almost go back and just do the small ceremony, but now I have 2 weddings on the book and 2 sets of wedding photos, and I can tell people I got married twice to the same guy. So it's fun.
And you never had to
which
break
one?
up.
Right. Which one are you going to celebrate? Are you going to celebrate both?
We're going to celebrate the May 8th as like our anniversary. And then I'm thinking on August, the date will just say, hey, we had our wedding this day. Remember? So, yeah.
That's
Very neat.
awesome. I love that. Well, we wanted to have you on here to share your story. And I don't want to take anything away, so I'm going to let you decide how you want to go into that. But just kind of share your story with us.
Okay. Thank you. So my story, when I was 10 and I was living with my family in California, my parents noticed that both of my arms had kind of a bump. When I was laying my arms out flat, there's kind of a bump in both of my wrists. And I guess like my dad has had orthopedic surgeries for things, and so it was more on his radar to look out for stuff like that. And so I went to see a physician, and they kind of went through a bunch of different things of like what it could be. And finally a doctor was able to figure out that I have something called Madelung's deformity. And Madelung's deformity is, you probably have never heard of it to those who are listening, or because it's extremely rare. I think it's 1 in 2 million women have ever been diagnosed, I think was the latest stat. And that's even from a few years ago. And so what Madeline's deformity does is if it's not corrected by surgery, the arms will bow and they'll be in a lot of pain and it'll be hard to use them. But in my case, I was able to go into surgery. They caught it when I was 10, so it was before I hit puberty. So there's a good chance of, minimizing that pain. And praise the Lord, I don't have any pain in my
Mm.
arms whatsoever.
Mm.
So we went to the surgery, but as a result of the surgery, they went in and did some things that I don't fully understand, but they moved some things around, and basically my arms essentially stopped growing at about 10 years old, and they're much shorter aesthetically than when like someone else who would have average arms my height. And I'm not a very tall person to begin with. I'm only 5 foot tall. So we're not talking.
Girl, dynamite comes in small packages. You're good.
I love that. I love that. I'm gonna use that quote. So that was really hard for me. As a
Mm.
teenager, like when you're a kid, you don't really notice those types of things, but then
Yeah.
and then you get to those teen years and you see other people kind of start to pick themselves apart and notice imperfections on their body and things like that, and then it was posed to me that other people were noticing that on me and asking questions about it, and that just caused me so much insecurity as a teen. And so that's kind of where all of the struggle started for me.
That's as when I was sharing with Kim a little bit about your story, she said that's a lot of weeds.
Yeah. And especially at a young age.
Yeah.
Like it's hard enough to be a teenager to put that on top of that's a lot. I mean, in my head, because I'm a clinician, so it's like depression, anxiety, all these things can compound everything.
Yeah, absolutely. And can you still hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I thought my mic had gone off. I'm sorry.
That's all
No,
good.
you're fine.
Like I said, this is real life.
Another weed to add.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. You're right. I think I experienced the normal teenage things as
Yeah.
well as recognizing that I was different, and it caused a lot of depression and anxiety.
Mm. What are some of the
Absolutely.
things that you did to compensate?
Oh, this is good. Looking back, probably most of what I did was compensation.
Mm.
Um, I think that so I've always been somebody who tries to make other people feel comfortable and go out of my way to make sure like the person that I'm like with, like their needs get met before mine. And I think a lot of that was not just out of the goodness of my heart, but it was about that I didn't think that I was as good as like
Mm.
the person that I was interacting with. I
Mhm.
think I just that low self-confidence,
Mhm.
I think turned into just so much people pleasing and
Mm.
just so much like just wanting people to like me, and people did. Like I rarely ever had problems with people, but I'm realizing that's because I never kind of figured myself out. I just
Mm.
wanted other people to like me. And then like with the physical aspect of having shorter arms, I wanted to bring zero attention to my arms. So
Mm.
long sleeves as much as possible. I would never like take pictures, and Instagram came into play around the same time when I was in middle school.
That's torture.
That's just terrible.
Yeah. So, but for me, I think I used that as a tool because I would only post pictures from certain angles where you kind of
Mm.
couldn't really tell what was going on, or I would only have long sleeves. But yeah, I was just full of compensating.
So one of the ways was to take the attention off yourself by making other people comfortable so that they would like you. Another
Mhm.
way, just in like wearing long sleeve shirts to not bring again, not bring attention to yourself. Your attention is on everybody else and to not bring attention to yourself.
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
Absolutely.
So how did your parents help you navigate? Sorry, Beth.
It's
How did your
okay.
parents help you navigate? Because I'm sure there are young people out there who have things that they're struggling with, and parents who are listening and going, okay, so how do I walk my child through this really challenging thing?
Yeah, so, with the surgery itself, I'll start there because that was really hard for me, that was really
Mm,
scary. I was the kid who you would have to bribe me to go get a shot, or my mom would have to, like, not tell me until the last second that that's where we were going, and so then you realize, okay, my child is going to have extremely invasive surgery. It's hard. And so my dad was a really good cheerleader for me,
mm,
and he was, like, right there by my bedside and, praying with me,
mm,
getting, stuffed animals for me, just, like, doing breathing exercises with me,
Mm,
coaching me through. Yeah, yeah, and knowing that he'd been through that himself,
mm,
but then later on into the, like, teen years and stuff, I think, like, my parents always told me that, they thought I was beautiful and they meant it and that there's but they also took I think their method was taking the focus away. Like, we didn't after the initial, surgery, we didn't really have too many conversations about, like, me looking different or being different. Like, it was kinda just like, this thing happened. We think that you're beautiful no matter what. And focusing more on aspects of my character and affirming me and, who I am as a person, affirming me that I'm smart, I was musical, investing
mm.
in those types of things, I think was a good deflection of like the physical aspect.
And that was helpful for you.
Yeah, I would say so for the most part. I would say I think it's hard when you have something that's so unique that you don't
Mm,
really know how to address it. So,
mm,
like, if I have a kid who has exactly what I have or a similar variety, I mean, the chances are almost like zero. But if that were to happen, I think
mhm,
I would know exactly what to say more so.
mm, mhm,
Um, but I think it helped me focus more on making sure that I was a good person, a kind
mm,
person, an
mhm,
empathetic
mhm,
person, and I think
mhm.
those things have kind of stuck with me. I mean, I wanna be pretty and look good and have people think that about me, I'm not gonna lie. But
I I was thinking, going back to when you were talking about compensating and, caring about everyone else's feelings and their needs and, kind of focusing on them instead of you. I just found that I know I've done the same thing throughout my life, to take negative things that have happened and maybe instead of actually dealing with the negative things, finding ways to do things that are considered really good things, right? Things that are,
Mhm.
well, not just consider good things, they are good things. It's good to think about other people. It's good to be kind to other people and focus on other people's needs and make them feel comfortable. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. All of that is fantastic. But if I'm correct, what I'm hearing you say, which Kim knows, this is like the theme of this whole podcast in a way, is that Beth has never been very good at, well, that I do this too. And that is just the constant um doing all of those things to keep me from having to really focus on the insecurity or the pain or the weeds that are going
Oh,
on.
absolutely. I didn't really I mean, okay, I'm 22 now, and I didn't confront this issue with my friends until college. Like, when people would ask me questions about it, I would just not talk about it with them. I would just I don't want to talk about it. I had a surgery, and I would shut down, and I think people would feel like I was in small Christian schools, and if I would move to a school, there'd be like kind of a round of questions at first. And then I think people kind of got the hint that she doesn't like talking about it. She doesn't want
Mm.
to talk about it.
Mm.
And I think that made it really easy for me to pretend like it didn't exist because everything else was fine. I was an average kid. I got good grades. I had lots of friends. I was involved. I was able to trick myself into thinking that I would never have to deal with it. Yeah.
Mm.
Huh.
So why did you start dealing with it in college? What
Yeah,
changed?
good question.
That is a good question. I think because when I got to Southern, I think I had the biggest support system I'd ever had. I think the people I think before in schools and things I mean I never played sports and I was never kind of like super great at anything. I was just kind of okay, but then college happened and I kind of some of the things that I'm good at became more valuable and I kind of found my niche and I
Mm.
found a support system and I felt more confident in the things that were important to me like writing and having
Mm.
extracurricular opportunities and I felt like it was safe to kind
Mm.
of be vulnerable because I knew that people around me really liked me for me. And
Mm.
and I could feel that. And I think that's what really finally encouraged me to be able to confront it and share about it.
I just think that that's so important and so important for people to hear, especially if you're a young person, but even us old people. And that is that, there are that often we find ourselves in situations where either it is truly this way or it's just our perception, but that is that what our gifts are or where we can excel, it's not valued. And
Mm.
for you, the things like what you just said, the things that were important to you that you were good at became more valued in college.
Yeah.
And there are that changes throughout the years, right? Like there are times when
Mm.
we are in a situation where where what we're doing is not being valued or we don't feel like it
Mhm.
is. Or we're just not good at what we're expected to do, in the place that we're at that current time. But I just think it's important to think about the fact that that's not the always. In other words,
Mm.
there are times of life, other periods of life, other locations, other groups of friends, new beginnings that can take place where then, you can feel more comfortable and your contributions can be more valued.
Absolutely.
Well, I was just wondering again. I can't not think of because I'm a whole lot older. I could be your mother very easily. Um, an old lady. Anyway, you're younger than both my children. Now I really feel old.
Oh, no. You
But
don't look it.
thinking from the parental perspective, um, it sounds like it's important to find something where our children excel.
Mm.
Mm. Mhm.
Um, so perhaps you were in situations where sports was the thing. I don't like sports. I just don't like them. Um, but to find something like writing or music, because you said something about that earlier, where your child can bloom.
Mhm.
Um, or if you're older, looking for those places yourself.
Right. Absolutely. My parents had me in private music lessons from the time I was very little because I expressed a big interest in that. And so those like that was kind of an escape for me because
I bet.
absolutely. And in my church community and in my school community, I was just okay. I was average. I was eh. But when I got to go into my little sub community of like
Mm.
music lessons and things, that's when I felt happy and free. And I would
Mhm.
often use it as an escape. And yeah, finding where you're valued is, I, I'm so glad that I was able to figure that out now, because I would I would hate to go back and spend more time like trying to make myself fit into something that
Mm.
wasn't me. Um,
Mm.
Mm. I love the words when you said, when I would do the music, well, I'm paraphrasing, that's when you felt free.
yeah.
There really is something about it's just letting yourself just be.
So what kind of music do you play? What do you
Yeah.
play, or what do you do?
Well, I'm I'm out of practice now. It's not my biggest
Oh,
outlet as much.
don't just answer the question.
Okay, okay. I I took piano lessons for I think 10 years, and
Mm.
I did a little bit of singing where I could too, and that was really fun for me. Um and so
So did your arms being shorter, did that impact you at all for playing piano, or how was that?
surprisingly not, because I can adjust the bench to where it needs to be, and so
Okay.
that was fine
Mm.
for me. However, I could not play the flute in middle school band. I had to play the clarinet because I couldn't do the whole
Oh, wow.
range of motion. Yeah, and and that was more so just for me, it was like, "Okay, they need a clarinet player, I'll play the clarinet," but for the most part, music, it didn't matter where what I looked like, where I came from,
Mhm.
anything. I just could just express. And
Mm.
I find that a lot in my life, that I do better when I have creative things going on that aren't necessarily about me, but about what
Mm.
I'm putting out there.
Mm.
Mm.
So tell us more about excuse me, about getting to college and then working through this. What did that look like and what was that like for you?
Yeah. A lot of time with God, a lot.
Mm.
Yeah. A lot of time being angry with God,
Mm.
Mm.
a lot of time being depressed and crying and
Mm.
not feeling like I wanted to go out and see people, not feeling like I would have periods of time where I would just be quiet and sad, and I think finally I just learned to let myself feel it out and just talk
Mhm.
to God about it and just be like, why the heck did you let this happen to me? Like,
Mm.
why do I have this different thing on my body? Like, why? Why?
Mm.
You're good to me, but why this? Like, and just I think just being straight up with God and just telling him exactly how it makes me feel, and then just letting him respond and be like, now I don't believe God did this to me anymore, but I believe that
Mm.
he's like, listen, I know this happened. I know it sucks. I know I didn't want this to happen to you, but if something that's going on, you may as well use it for good. And that's when I kind of turned it around and was like, well, this is never going away. I may as
Mm.
well use this as an example of like how your life can be full and good and joyous, even if like you have things about it that are just really painful that you can't change. And
Mm.
I made a commitment to God that if he gave me opportunities to tell other people about it, that I would. And then,
Mm.
having the and here we are.
And here
And
we
here
are,
we
and we
are.
are so thankful. We are so thankful.
Wow. So how long did that how I'm gonna call it the grieving process because that's what it
Yeah.
sounds like. How long was that until you came to the place of acceptance?
Um, okay. Well, I would say like probably from like age like 15 to like 19 was a
Mm.
lot of that. A lot. And I'm
Mhm.
not even convinced I'm fully through it.
Mm.
But
100%.
but I think I did the majority of it, like, starting around age 18, and then,
Mm.
like, it was, like, an intense kind of just, like, pushing out of, like, all of the feelings that I'd been carrying, and then just being like, "Okay, we're not gonna spend all of our life thinking about this anymore."
Mm.
Mm.
But that's such a great example of how when we allow ourselves to feel the weeds, we can come on the other side, and then there can be joy. Because what
Mm.
you've done is you've taken your pain and grieved it and then made meaning out of it, so that
Yeah.
it's not for nothing. Kind of
Yeah.
like very much like the beauty for ashes.
Mm.
And the garment of praise instead of a spirit of despair. I mean, that's what you've done. Well, that's what
Mhm.
God has done through you, obviously.
Yeah.
But you're not you just didn't stand on the corner and twiddle your thumbs and wait for God to do it. You did it with
Right.
him.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What did it look like to be angry with God? And
Mm.
the reason I ask that is because I think so many people are hesitant. And so we don't go through that process, which is so important to do. So, what did it look like?
Oh, lots of again, crying and just actually just praying and being like, "What the heck?" And then also, if I'm
I love that you tell God what the heck, and then he tells you, well, it sucks. I just like, that's the best.
that's my narrative
That's
between the
great.
two of us. Like, and also just looking for excuses as to, like, if I'm being completely honest, as to not believe in him or not believe that he's good, and then allowing him to prove me wrong over and over again, that, like, no, I'm good, what happened to you is bad, but I'm good, and just accepting that, like, I'm not going to be fully happy without him, because I've tried that and it just doesn't work, and then it makes me more angry, and then I blame him more, and he's like, "Well, have you tried spending time with me? Have you tried doing what I told you to do? Well, that's why you're mad." And so that's just what I hear him saying to me when I talk to him and journal and cry and hit the steering wheel. But
Do you have an example of when you were testing him?
yeah, I think just like when I was um in like my earlier teen years, I would just be like, well, I don't really see the point in
Mhm.
going to church or like doing devotionals, or like I thought it would be trendier, and this is more so what I was feeling internally more than what I was telling other people, of like, well, I'm not even totally sure Christianity is the only thing for me, and I'm not even totally sure that the Bible is totally true, and I guess I'll just go along with it, and unless something better comes along. And
Mm.
then I started getting more. I had a Bible teacher who, um, and I think maybe literature evangelism is not something that everyone necessarily does anymore, but it's something that a Bible teacher approached me when I was like 16 or 17 and said, "Hey, you need to work for me this summer." And I was like, "All right." Sure. and and then I resisted it, but then I did, and I learned about, I don't think I necessarily witnessed anyone that summer. I think I was witnessed to quietly,
Mm.
and I realized I spent so much time with God because I didn't have a cell phone walking around. I didn't have
Mm.
anything. I wasn't with friends. I just was me walking
Mm.
back and forth for like 8 hours a day, and I would talk to God, and I would be like so much happier. Nothing changed except for just the amount of time that I was spending with God. And I think that's when I kind of realized, like, I'm not going to get through this life if I try and do it just me. Like
Mhm.
I've got to do it with him.
Mm.
Wow.
So, what do
Wow.
you mentioned now working with young girls? young women,
Yeah.
and how that's kind of a passion for you. How have you
Mhm.
found uh, how does um your diagnosis and your what do you call it? I'll just
Um, Deformity is
okay,
the
deformity.
yeah.
Okay. So how does your deformity help you
Mm.
Hmm.
in your ministry now?
Yeah. I think so. I I I like speaking to young people and kind of just sharing my testimony in a longer version of like what the Facebook video was. And I think it's really helpful because when I walk up on stage, you can and I intentionally wear short sleeves and it's
Wow.
you can
That is so brave.
thank you.
Wow. That's very
Thank
vulnerable.
you.
Wow.
It is, and but then I go up there and I think I immediately gain credibility with people because they see what I'm talking
Mm.
about, and
Mm,
they see, "Okay, I can see that on you, and I could see how that might be hard, but you seem really happy, so maybe I should listen to what you are trying to
Mm.
say."
Hmm.
that's
Yeah.
awesome.
Isn't
That's
isn't it
awesome.
something how when we share our struggles that actually connects us, and if we
Yeah.
make ourselves just look like we've got it all together, that actually creates distance. But it's in sharing our struggles and our suffering that we find commonness and
Oh,
connection.
absolutely. And one
Mhm.
of the main points that I try and make when I share is that, like, we all have some sort of condition, and
Mhm.
mine is a medical thing and it's visible, but you have something too, and that's where we all have common ground, and that's why
Mm.
none of us is better or worse than the other. It
Mm.
may just look like that. Um,
Have you
so
ever had a young girl or young woman come up to you, um, and tell you what a difference you've made?
yeah. Um, I don't have a specific
Mm.
that stands out, but I remember, the most recent time I was at an academy, a young woman came up to me and said, "Thank you for being brave
Mm.
because not a lot of people are willing to be brave, but, like, I needed to hear that today." And
Wow.
I don't know why she needed to hear it, but things like that are just so affirming that God wants me to do this, and that makes me so happy.
Hmm.
So when did you meet your now husband in this process?
Yeah, I met him when I was 18 and we started dating when I was 20.
Mm.
And so we had conversations about this and he was so supportive. And this is I'm glad you asked this question because one of the cool things about him is that one of my biggest fears didn't come true. I always had, boys that liked me or whatever, but nothing ever kind of stuck or was serious. And I kind of always thought to myself, well, what if like people are going to be afraid of like having children with me or getting
Mm.
married to me because of this? And um Devin and we were good friends before we started dating. Um, and in the few, like, we had some months where we started really being intentional and ramping up. And I remember he was actually in Asheville when we started dating, which is 3 hours from where I was going to college. So we'd have to use FaceTime a lot. And so we had the conversation over FaceTime. And I was like, well, like, we've never talked about this before, but like, this is my thing. And like, you know, if we're gonna, date and get married, we both want kids. And his response was just he was like, yeah, so what? Like, I've got
Mm.
stuff too. Like, I just like want you to be like the mom of my kids. And I just think that
Mm.
you are incredible. And like, your body is your body. And I mean, he's like, well, you're beautiful and all of that. But like, he's like, basically just like, so what? So
Mm.
what? And that was cool.
Wow. That's neat.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So uh, the weeds are something.
Mm-hmm.
Are you at a place now where you have real joy in your deformity?
I That's a really good question. I think that I have real joy in my life.
Mm.
Um, I'd love to say that if someone gave me a magic wand and I could choose whether or not to change it, I would love to think that I wouldn't.
Mm.
But I think there's still that tiny part of me that's like, well, maybe I'd feel more confident in summer dresses, or
Mm.
maybe if I could add like 6 inches to my height, I'd feel more powerful. Um, but I think that, like, I know that my relationship with God would be different had I not had to
Mm.
go through this, and
Mm.
who I am and where I am would be drastically different as well. And so I think I'm happy despite of it, and I think I've taken control of it, and
Mm.
I've not let it take control of me.
Mm.
Yeah.
Mm.
There are so many people dealing with their own pile of weeds
Mm,
right now that are letting it control them.
mm. Yeah.
Yeah. So I love hearing that. That's really cool. Kim, do you
Yeah,
have any other?
well,
Go
I
ahead.
was just thinking, oftentimes we believe that um that period of time, Natalie, where you were ignoring it.
Mhm.
When we ignore it or we ignore the struggles, that's when we think that it doesn't control us.
Mhm.
And when we're in the middle of the weeping and the angry and we're looking it in the face and we're dealing it with it, we think that we're letting it control us.
Yeah.
But it's exactly the opposite.
Mhm.
When we're ignoring it, it is controlling us. It's
Mhm.
this silent beast that is running the show. And when
Mhm.
we can face it, whatever it is, when we face it, when we deal with it, when we wrestle with it, kind of like Jacob on the hill before he had to confront Esau, or Esau confronted him, or however we want to tell the story. We're wrestling it and God at the same time, and then we don't let go until God blesses.
Right.
And then we have the blessing, and then the blessing is we are now the master, and it no longer masters us.
Mm.
Kim, how do we though? Here, question for you. How do we though know whether or not we're getting stuck in either place?
Mm.
Ooh, that's a good question.
Because you know what I'm talking about. There are some of us that get stuck in the when it's controlling us, and but there are also people that get stuck in the weeping and wailing and gnashing of teeth.
Yeah, I don't I don't really know the the direct answer to that, but what comes to mind is when there's a payoff, like like a sick payoff to the weeping and gnashing of teeth, when we're gaining attention for it, when it gets us all riled up and we like all that, we're like that kind of like an adrenaline junction, but it's not really it's more like a cortisone, not cortisone, cortisol. That's the stuff. Like we're getting like it's just an unhealthy. I like what this does. Um, is when we can notice, but it's going to be very hard for someone to really know that about themselves. When the goal is I'm going to process through this and I want to get to the other side,
Yeah.
I'm going to talk about the pain. And honestly, that's why we need a therapist, because the
I was
therapist
just
is going to be able to call the therapist is going to be able to call you out and say, okay, wait a minute, you can sit in your pile of manure and you can, like, smush it all over your face, and then you're going to smell like manure all the time. Or you can dig in the pile of manure, and yes, it's going to smell bad, but then you can grow a garden with it.
And take a shower.
And yes, and take a shower after you've made your garden.
I was just
Exactly.
gonna say, as you were talking, Kim, that I think that's where, like, that's where I think it's so it can be so helpful to find a therapist to help us through some of the challenging moments. At least I found that to be so helpful for me.
Well, the other thing is too,
Yeah.
I can't, unless I'm the therapist, I can't, I can't look at somebody else and say, oh, they're wallowing. They
No,
may still be, the grieving process can take a very, very long time. And it's not the measurement of trauma or struggle that says, okay, well, if you have this, then you're gonna struggle for 3 months. But if you have this, then you can, you're allowed to struggle for a
Right.
year. Different people are just different. And if they don't have the right coping skills and they don't know how to process through things and they don't have a support system, it's going to take longer.
Mhm.
So we can't look at someone else and say, well, you need to be done by now. That's
Yeah.
not for us.
No, thank you. Thank you for that. All right. Well, Natalie, what would you like to tell anyone out there that thinks they have a deformity, or they're just, too fat, too short, too whatever, or have a headache and their face looks all puffy and ridiculous, or whatever it is. What would you say to those women, girls, but boys and men as well?
Well, I think we touched on it before, but I always point to the verse in Psalms 139:14 where it says, "For I am fearfully and wonderfully made." And I like to point out that there's no like caveat in that. There's no, I'm fearfully and wonderfully made, but I'm struggling with depression, but I'm too tall, but my teeth are yellow, or whatever it is. And like, and remind yourself of that. Remind yourself when you catch yourself speaking negatively to yourself, because it's so easy to stand in front of the mirror and figure out everything that's wrong with yourself, and just taking control of that inner negative loop and saying, okay, I'm fearfully and wonderfully made, and God said that about me, and that's true, and just accepting that that's true, even if you can't understand right now why it would be.
Yep.
Yeah, we really have to choose to believe what God says about us.
Yeah.
Rather than what the world says about us through media, or even what we may say about ourselves. We really need to believe that and stand on those truths.
One of the best challenges that my mentor asked me to do a long time ago, when I think I was in a good loop where I was just kind of around the same theme. She said, I want you to every single day wake up and just before you get out of bed, say the prayer, oh Lord, today, please show me who I am in your eyes. And that was extremely helpful, extremely powerful.
Yeah.
To continually look for that and to see what was truth about who I was. And because there's also someone out there who's trying to get us all to believe a bunch of hooey.
Yes. And they work very hard. He works very hard.
Yes.
And his minions.
Yep. But our God is much greater and much stronger and has a much more beautiful, beautiful outlook on who we are.
Yeah.
So,
and if when we want to know how worthy we are, we need only look at the cross.
Yep.
Because that is the picture of our value. And that's the God of heaven. That's nobody from here. That's the God of heaven that believes that we are so valuable that he would hang on that cross just so he could be with us.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So Natalie, you are, I know, I'm so glad we have this on video now, because I can say, if you're listening to this podcast and you quite wonder, just go over and watch it, because on
Because
YouTube,
she is beautiful.
oh,
Absolutely delightful and
she
beautiful.
is
Thank
so
you.
beautiful.
Thank
Um,
you.
yeah, I never even like the whole time we were sitting there having that wonderful conversation when we first met, and it was a long conversation. Like you said, we just didn't stop talking. Um, all I remember from that time, and it wasn't until I saw the video that we were talking about on Facebook that I even realized that you had a deformity.
Yeah.
Because you are such a joyous delight. I mean, you just,
Oh,
there are people that you meet in this world that, when you've spent time with them, you spent time with someone who has spent time with God, and
oh,
you are one of those people.
Yeah.
So
You exude joy. It just is just all over
yeah.
your face, for
But
sure.
mm,
that's not just it is because of you, but it's
Mm.
because you're spending time with him. I really
Mhm.
believe
yeah.
that.
Mhm. Mhm.
I think it's different. There are people that are happy and people
Mhm.
that are
Mhm.
gregarious and all this stuff, and they don't have the same thing.
It's
So,
true.
Mm,
um, so thank you for what you are doing. Thank you for sharing that with young girls and young women. Thank you for being here today and having this conversation with us. We have loved it.
Mm.
me
Um,
too.
you're absolutely a joy, for sure.
Oh,
Um, we always ask a question at the end of our podcast, which is, in the last 24 hours, what is something that's brought you joy, laughter, or a smile? And we all three answer it. So
okay.
um, I'm going to let Kim go first. We'll
Oh,
go that way
okay.
on the screen.
Okay. Well, this is a little bit more than 24 hours, but yesterday,
We're not going to count.
thank you. Yesterday morning, my husband got home from a all-night military type ruck experience. He left on he's been training for probably 2 or 3 months, and he's part of this thing called F3, which I think started in Charlotte, North Carolina.
Hmm.
And it's men, and the 3 Fs are fitness, fellowship, and faith.
Hmm.
And it's just this community of men, and they exercise together, they have worship time together, they have this thing on Slack, I don't even know what that is, but they have these conversations and they're encouraging. Anyway, so he's been training for 2 months with this 40-pound rucksack on his back. And it was this on Saturday night, they exercised, and then all night long they're doing things like carrying telephone poles. They're in these platoons, they're carrying telephone poles. They're doing yeah, Natalie's face.
I'm sorry.
I agree with you. And they're like, they had to cross this creek that was like waist high, but then on the other side of the creek, it was like a straight up thing. So they had to work as a team to get everybody up. Anyway, it was grueling. It's a thing that men love to do. They're all being wild. And I was scared. I mean, he's 57 years old. Okay. All these other men are like in their 30s and younger, and he came home from that, and when I saw on Facebook, they had Facebook Live, and his face came across, and I could see he was tired and he was cold, but he wasn't exhausted. Like, he was physically tired, like as in I'm sleepy tired, because he was up all night. And just to see his face, that he did it. He did this big thing, and the endurance that it took, and the gumption that it took, and the stick-to-itiveness that it took, and just pushing through and getting to the other side. And I had no idea I would be this proud of what he had done. It was so amazing. I didn't know it was possible, but I love him even more for the character that he showed by doing this. And what people in his platoon are saying is that he was always encouraging. He was always helping. He was always just encouraging people to just keep going, and we're going to make it. And it's just like, that's my man. That is my man. And that just brought me, I mean, I know I'm crying, but that just brings me so much joy.
That's so cool. I don't know about that was laughter. What are the three things? I
Laughter,
guess it
joy,
is
or a
joy.
smile.
It's
It's
joy.
joy. It's pure
It
joy.
is joy. Not laughter or smile, but
No.
joy.
No, I was scared.
All right, Natalie.
Yeah. So I think it was yesterday, I checked the mail and one of my really good friends, her name's Caroline, she had sent me a greeting card for no other reason other than just to say, thanks for being my friend and I love you. And it was so sweet. And I don't get cards that are for no reason ever.
Yeah,
Um so
we don't get those anymore.
no. And the front of the card said, we can't accomplish anything alone. And I loved that. And I have it hanging up on my fridge now. Yeah.
That's awesome. That's
Yeah.
so good.
Yeah.
So mine is very it's like as far opposite from Kim's as can possibly be. So Chris and I have moved and we are here in lovely Asheville, Hendersonville area, which we love. But we have our new apartment. We're just a little tiny apartment and it is above retail stuff. So we can just walk downstairs and go out to eat and go do things. Well, yesterday, Chris had a particular today's Monday. And yesterday, though, Chris had a meeting he had to prepare for. So he was at the office and I went to get us dinner. And I was trying to come up with something that he would really like. And Chris really enjoys brisket. So, and I'm vegetarian, so no brisket for me. And, but I really wanted to get him brisket. So I got on the web, there's a little barbecue place just almost below me. And so I went online to order him a brisket sandwich. And guess what's the first thing I saw? They had a tempeh barbecue sandwich.
Cool. That's so
I
cool.
was so excited. I was
Yes,
just like,
indeed.
sure, I get to walk downstairs and go to one restaurant and pick up both a sandwich for him that he will love and one for me. So that brought me great joy and a smile. So
Very
that's
good.
it. Well, Natalie, thank you so much for
Thank
being
you,
here.
Natalie. It
I
was such a
am
joy.
so thankful, and I just know that that there is somebody out there who needs to hear your testimony. So, and
Aw.
if you want to, you can find Natalie. It's Natalie Lilly on Facebook, and
Mhm.
there's more videos of her sharing her story in more detail. But yeah, just thank you so much for your testimony and for the joy that exudes from you. It is just really a pleasure to be around.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
praise God. Thank you so much for having me. It's been so much fun.
Yeah.
All
And I'm
right.
very excited that you're going to be joining the ranks of the Carolina pastors' wives.
Oh, yay. Me too.
Yeah, that's Kim's one of them. So you
Yeah.
guys will, hang out at times. So
For
hang out.
sure. Yeah.
Good.
all right. Thank you so much. And for all you guys out there, if you are in the midst of the weeds, go find some joy.
Mhm.
All right. We'll talk to you later. Bye.
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 Thank you so much for joining us today. We would really love to hear from you. So please find us. We're on Facebook and Instagram. Just search for Joy in the Weeds. You can also email us. Our email address is joy@carolinasda.org. That's joy@carolinasda.org. Now, we hope that today, as you navigate the weeds, you will also hold on to moments of joy. This podcast is a production of the Carolina Conference of the Seventh-day Adventist Church.